So now that we went through animations, we are going to go through constraints so we can see how we can constrain or add constraint on objects that can help us with animation or even with working in the engine or the software. So we have the object selected, and if you go to this tab, which is object constraint properties, we have this add object constraint, which basically means we can in some ways constrain the object to do something specific. So we can do something simple like copy location, and let's say we select the camera. We can just basically attach to whatever point the camera is, we can just attach our object. And we can also keep some offset. So if I move it like this, we can still keep that distance. So it all depends on basically what you want to do. It can also be in world space or in local space. And that's kind of it. We can also choose, maybe we want to follow it on the ground, so we can do something like this. Or actually, I'm gonna not do Z, only X and Y. And this way we can basically move it on the Z freely, but it will always be below the camera or below whatever object we have it attached, which you can see it can be pretty useful to kind of limit itself at some distance. We can do, let's actually first, so this is one way that you can put it to 0, 0, 0, but another way would be to click Control A, and then we can do apply location, or not apply location, but let's see, we can dot cursor. We can basically snap it to wherever the cursor is instead of typing 0, 0, 0. So you would usually click F3 and then you have a bunch of options that you can use. This might be a bit slower if you just manually try to type or try to set it to 0. Let's see. The next thing we have copy rotation, which does similar to the other one. We also have copy transform, which does exactly what it says, where you don't have to add 3 or 4 separate constraints. You can adjust this one and it will completely try to attach to the camera. Of course, we can do before. So this way it is kind of still offset, but it will follow whatever the camera tries to do. So this might be good if you have like an UI or something that needs to be always attached to the camera, where if I try to look through the lens of the camera, and let's say this is an element, we can always have it attached to the camera, whatever we do. So this is this can be pretty useful, depends on what you want to do. Next, let's also reset our object. I'll reset the scale, so I'm gonna scale it up in here. The next constraint that you have, you can just add limits on your object. This would be, let's say, maximum 5 meters we want on X. Now we can start moving on X, and we can see even if our location is 13 meters, we cannot go past 5 meters. So really simple constraint, pretty powerful. We can limit where objects can go. It can also do maintain volume, which is also part of the transform, but we won't go over each one since I think the general idea is similar between them. Next, what we can do is tracking. So this is good if we want the object to just follow this kind of the constraint that limits where the object is kind of quote-unquote looking at. So if you want some character's eyes to follow some certain point, so this is good for rigging. When you're creating IK rigs for maybe face, you can say eyes always look at this object, and then you can put this object to something, and then the eyes will just follow, so that way you can easily animate instead of manually rotating your eye when you want to for a character to look at something. So this is kind of a pretty useful thing here. You can also limit how it needs to be tracked. This, of course, you have to track with your objects depending on what part of the object you want to actually look towards the camera. Pretty simple one there. Then you can have relationship with the parts of the armature. So I guess we can let's say this is a bone. We could do this. Actually, this is not the right one. We can do child off, and then if we select our armature, we can select a specific bone, and then we can make it so that when our bone moves, our actual object moves. So this might be useful if, let's say you have a leg and you want to attach maybe a pouch or something to the thigh of your character. You might, instead of having to rig that pouch and attach the whole skeleton, you can just add a constraint and just put it maybe wherever you want, next to the thigh, so it looks like it is attached, and this way you can just move the bone and have everything working instead of having to actually rig or weight paint or whatever with the object. So you can just make it a child of. And when you select the target, select armature as the target, it will also give you options for the bones, which can become pretty useful. Next, we have stretched tool. Let's use camera for this, where depending on what you want to do, it will kind of try to change the volume of your mesh depending on the distance. This is good for squash and stretch if you want to make your character kind of a bit more bendy and you want to have a controller that is separate from that character. Instead of having like shape keys or something like that, you can have a simple constraint that will let you create some really nice motions with your character. And I think that's in generally it, what you would use. There is some more specific ones, but I don't think we have anything more specific. We can have follow track. This I think is useful if you actually have the track. Right now we don't have anything animating. But yeah, I think that's about it. We also have something like floor. Yes, this is kind of similar to limit location, so we don't have to go through it. We have follow path. This might be useful if you have, so if I click Shift A and add curve, Bezier curve, I can attach my object to that object, and let me actually set all of this to 0. And now what we can do is basically make this object follow, let's click 0. Oh yeah, we can actually animate it. Let's see. So it goes from 0 to 1 and you should be able to animate it, and now I forgot exactly where that option is. I think, oh yeah, it is in here, I think. So yeah, you can basically change the evaluation frame, and then it will go to your basically curve and move it around. If I click tab and try to edit the curve, it will continue following the curve. So this is basically really useful if you want like a defined path that you can later modify or adjust instead of having keyframes that you'll have to move around or change. So yeah, that's kind of it for constraints, pretty useful. The more you start working with Blender and with animation, you're going to use more and more constraints to make your workflow easier.